The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hey, this is Matt Landry, the voice of Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars The Clone Wars. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars. This is where the fun begins.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Welcome to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we discuss everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books, TV shows, and more, we're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in the Star Wars universe. Today we're talking about Star Wars costumes. Our favorites, our least favorites, the ones we'd like to wear, the ones we maybe have worn at some point. I'm your host, Robert King. Joining me today are Father Andrew, Father Fett, Kinstetter, and Thomas Salerno. Welcome, Father Fett.
Hey, it's good to be here.
And it's good to have you, Thomas.
Hello, Robert. Great to be here.
So before we jump into the conversation, we'd like to thank our patrons on Patreon. This episode, we'd especially like to thank Ryan B., Martin G., Kelly G., Jacob S., and Andrew G. Your generous support helps us to produce The Secrets of Star Wars, as well as many other shows here at StarQuest. Any of you can join them by going to our website, sqpn.com/give. All right, it's getting close to Halloween. There are always fan cons coming up. Let's talk about some costumes. Thomas, before the show, you were talking about an exhibit at the Smithsonian that you had gone to. Tell us about what you saw there and kind of the impact it had.
Yeah, so this exhibit, which was at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum from 1997 through 1999, so just as they were getting ready for the Phantom Menace to come out, and through that time period, I was in Washington with family, and we visited the Smithsonian museums, and so I got to see Star Wars: The Magic of Myth, which is this exhibition that included a lot of props and costumes from both the three original trilogy movies and from the upcoming Phantom Menace as well. And they also, besides just showcasing all the great props and ship models and costumes, they tried to look at Star Wars through the lens of Joseph Campbell's influential book, Hero with a Thousand Faces. And I picked up there the companion book, which my original copy, I used it so much and read it so many times it fell apart, but eBay came through for me with a nice new hardback version, which I've read again. I just loved that exhibit. It had a huge impact on me because that was the time when I was really kind of first really getting into Star Wars. I had only had just seen one or two of the movies briefly on TV as a small child, and then really only started getting into it once the special editions came out, and my brother and I watched them together, and then there was the run-up to the Phantom Menace, and everyone was so hyped. So this was at my kind of really starting to get into the universe, and this exhibit really opened up the Star Wars universe for me and really helped me think a lot about it as a world, seeing all the props and costumes, and also getting to see just what, just some more sense of the movie making magic of it, both the actors in costume and also, just the look at the ship models and the AT-AT models and all that stuff, and the lightsabers and the props. It fueled my, and at the time as a young boy, I had an ambition to be a filmmaker myself. So seeing all the behind the scenes stuff was really cool too. And it was a great exhibit. I wish they would bring something of that scale back. Apparently, it eventually traveled to different museums around the country. Yeah. Have either of you seen it?
So I was going to mention back in, this would have been 2015. So, I mean, decently recent, not enough for the sequel trilogy, but I was in Seattle. And I don't know if it was called the Making of Myth, but there was a Star Wars costume exhibit at the art museum there, and I didn't even plan to go. I was going up there on vacation. It was kind of our fall break in seminary, and so I had gone up there, and I don't even know how we heard about it, but we went and checked it out, and I mean, like, what I remember most are a couple things. I mean, they had the costumes from all the various movies. The principal ones that I remember were like Queen Amidala's dresses.
Yeah.
They had, which was, and like the ones used in the movie. It wasn't just like these are copies, but the ones from the movies. The other big one that I, of course, remember and gravitated towards naturally was Jango Fett's armor was there as well.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I just remember you walk through that and you're just, I mean, you're blown away by the intricacy of the detail. I can't imagine Natalie Portman wearing that. I mean, like, it's heavy and
massive,
ornate
yeah.
But gorgeous. I mean, it was the people who designed that stuff. It's super impressive. So yeah, it definitely is traveling. I think it's still going places, I think, but I'm not sure. I haven't looked it up recently.
I think what I was most drawn to as a kid was Anakin Skywalker's pod racing outfit. You know, just because it was something I could have potentially gotten into, you know, like, and
it was your size.
Yeah, it was my size. So it's like, and just that neat helmet with the goggles, you know, and I also love just the something about the flight helmets grabbed me too, because I love the Rebel flight suits and the helmets and all that.
Yeah, I was looking up. There was one costume designer for episodes 4 and 5 for the original Star Wars and Empire, named John Mollo. And I'm just thinking about how his work just set the tone for the entire universe. And, you know, we often, you know, think of, you know, Ralph McQuarrie and his drawings, his concept drawings, and, you know, the teams working on all of the starship models and things. But the costumes set the visual tone for Star Wars, at least in my imagination, as much as any of the other elements. And
just think of Princess Leia and at the beginning of episode 4.
Oh yeah,
the iconic look that she has with that white dress and her hair. You know,
yeah, it's and you can see the development from that costume to like all of Amidala's. You know, regalia and even, you know, the costume design for Rey and for you know, like all of the sort of series going forward. So yeah, it's fascinating how they've sort of taken that original seed and continued to riff on it, and sometimes more successfully than others. But yeah, it's when I was thinking about my favorite costumes in the Star Wars universe, and I have favorites from like every era of Star Wars, which is nice. It's like, oh yeah, they continue to do costuming well at every point. I was just tempted to put down like just all of the costumes in the original Star Wars because they're so iconic. But you know, I think to throw out what are our favorite costumes, I want to like take a step back, because yeah, the Leia's original gown is just iconic, and Han Solo's, you know, is the model of, you know, smuggler chic, and and yes, you know, what was originally Obi-Wan's just sort of desert hermit wear became standard Jedi robes, and you know, so those costumes are so iconic. But like stepping back from that, yeah, let's talk about what some of our favorite costumes are from any era. I mean, we can just popcorn on this, and you know.
Well, I'll start. And I think anybody who knows my story would not be surprised in the least what my favorite costume is. I really got into Star Wars with Episode 2. So Episode 1 came out. I remember it kind of made a little bit of stir in my family, but not a lot. And then for some reason, we must have like gotten the VHS afterwards and sort of started to get into it. But when Episode 2 hit theaters, that's the first one that I saw in the theater. And so for me, Jango Fett just, I mean, stole my imagination. I mean, to have this bounty hunter in this super cool armor. I mean, sure, Boba Fett was in Episode 5 and 6, but I hadn't really paid attention to the original trilogy prior to then, so I wasn't really even focusing on Boba Fett. But and also, to be blunt, I prefer the blue of Jango Fett to the green of Boba Fett. And so I've always just liked Jango more as a character. I even mentioned in our recording last week, we talked about video games. There's a whole video game dedicated to Jango Fett called Bounty Hunter, which is not canon anymore because it was developed before Disney purchased Lucasfilm. But you get the backstory of like, how did Count Dooku find Jango Fett and pull him into to be the template for the clones, and I loved his story. But as a kid, or high school or junior high at that point for me, the look of Jango Fett just was so cool. I mean, you've got this armor, you've got the jetpack, he's got this like kind of cable that he shoots out of his arm and can, grapple things or, try to trip up Obi-Wan on the fight scene and just and then the helmet. I mean, super iconic for Mandalorians. But again, like the colors and just the way his helmet came together was just totally stole my imagination.
Yeah, I imprinted on Boba Fett in the original trilogy. For those of you watching our live video feed,
right?
Father Fett is holding up his personal Jango Fett helmet.
And on the inside, it's got padding. So this one was meant to be worn. It's got air, a USB chargeable, little fans. Because we'll get into this maybe a little bit later. But if you're gonna cosplay as a Mandalorian, it's so incredibly hot, and these things you can't hardly see out of them. And what you can see often gets fogged up by your own breath. And the humidity of when you're sweat and stuff. So like this one has fans in it that'll keep your head cooler than most. But I I have my own Jango Fett helmet that is wearable for sure.
Nice. Do you have the rest of the suit of armor?
Yes, but I also realize that I need to be a lot slimmer to fit into it. So that's on hold until I can get back into my triathlon shape. I need to be in Mandalorian shape to wear that effectively. So,
I was saying I imprinted on Boba Fett in Empire Strikes Back because unlike you two young whippersnappers, I saw the original trilogy in the theater, and so Boba Fett was the cool one. And something about the blue and silver of Jango Fett's armor struck me as almost like too slick and polished. I loved the battered, dented, really heavily worn look of Boba Fett in the original trilogy. I also was super thrilled when they announced the TV show The Mandalorian and Din Djarin, and I thought that he had, his armor is a great sort of update that's really clearly inspired by the original Fett armor, whether, Boba or Jango or wherever you call the original. But, taking it in, slightly updated direction. But I think my favorite Mandalorian costume from that series has got to be the armorers.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like combining the fur with the armor and the horns on it and everything, like just it was so original and unexpected and yet so ingrained with that Mandalorian DNA, and I just loved it.
Well, and her helmet is more gold too, so it's got I mean, she's got
the
such
colors.
I really like Bo-Katan's helmet.
Yeah.
Because something about the owl imagery, something about that bird of prey just makes sense for like a Mandalorian aesthetic to me.
Well, and I appreciate that, like the male armor is different in look than the female armor, and like they're both equally menacing and appropriate for their for the Mandalorians, and Bo-Katan's armor is also one of my favorites, and plus it's kind of got that bluish silver that I like.
I think my favorite costumes, not that I would ever wear these or be fit enough to wear them, is I love the clone armor in all its iterations, especially the war paint, because I think that's such a cool way that they were able to have the clones, but besides their various like hairstyles and stuff like that, a way for them to develop their own culture and their kind of culture within each of their like units, their squads and divisions and legions and various units. Just the unit war paint I thought was so cool and such a contrast to the kind of lame, bland, regimented white of most of the Imperial stormtroopers, except for like specialists who will have maybe a colored stripe on their helmet and that's it. But like, I loved the especially in both the in Revenge of the Sith and then showing later in the animated stuff, the Clone War paint is really cool. I like that a lot.
What's great about that, and I appreciate that you brought it up. I mean, that's the whole point of, even if you watch the Clone Wars, like the humanity behind the clones can be seen through their various different costumes. And I think that's great because like otherwise you just have this kind of bland, all is the same clones. But but no, that's the whole point of the Clone Wars, is it humanizes the clones and then it makes Order 66 way more devastating. Yeah.
And something about the blue and white of the 501st, I just like a lot. That color scheme. Oh, it's also SQBN's color scheme, blue and white. But it's like,
no connection there at all.
At all, yeah. But no, something about the 501st color scheme. Just, I mean, I also like the color blue anyway. So, but and also it kind of reminds me of there's an artist out there who did a rendition of the clone armor in blue and white, but with the white tree of Gondor on it, because sometimes blue and white is used to be is sometimes Gondor's color. So
blue and silver,
blue or black and silver. But when it's not like the royal is black and silver, but then there's also a blue and silver version. But so and I love mashups like that, and I just love that kind of like deep royal blue contrasted with the white is something that really that's like my aesthetic. I like that.
Well, and the irony of bringing out the individuality of each of the clone troopers when they are literally copies of the same person versus the anonymity and sort of cog in the machine-ness of the Imperial stormtroopers, who are recruits. They're individual people, but their individuality is erased, whereas the clones, who kind of theoretically don't have individuality, is emphasized and expressed, and that use of the costuming in those different ways is really interesting.
I think we have to, before we leave the clones, we have to bring up the Bad Batch. because they take that to a whole new extreme, which is so, especially Wrecker. I pulled up a picture of Wrecker's, and I mean, he's got like this crazy, like, you know, scary looking mouth with teeth on his helmet. And my favorite out of them is Tech, who, when you look at him, actually, I mean, he's the whitest of the bunch. He's got the most lightest colors, red and white. And then, Hunters, and the rest of them, they're a lot more kind of dark grays and red, but still, they've all got their own individual take. Crosshair, of course, being the darkest, I think, of the bunch, naturally, because of his storyline even, but
and one thing they talk about in the successors to the clone troopers, the stormtroopers, in the magic of myth and Imperial costuming in general, is how much it is inspired by Nazi Germany. You know, for obvious reasons. It's this totalitarian dictatorship. You know, everything from Darth Vader's helmet having that kind of that angle, like that flare, like that flare, like the both from the World Wars, the German field helmet, and just the fact that they're called stormtroopers. The fact that the coloring is often, you know, red, black, and white. You know, you have the red guards, the white stormtroopers, the black for both the pilots, and then like the death troopers, which are really awesome, like upgrade of the stormtroopers, and they just like scream, you know, the Waffen SS or something. And then and then just the random Imperial officers, they look like they stepped off of central casting for, like, you know, some stupid Nazi officer in a World War II movie. You know, it's different
on the trousers.
The riding pants, you know, and the big shiny boots and all that stuff, and the hat is just different enough so that it's not identical, you know, but and that kind of field gray, that greenish gray that you associate with, you know, they're definitely trying to, you know, evoke, you know, in the minds of any, you know, Western European or American bad guy, you know, just by, you know, putting them in a vaguely Nazi, you know, uniform.
Well, I think that was part of the point even of the original trilogy, was they were a lot more just black and white, good and evil, and not as nuanced as the newer movies try to be. So, I mean, even just, I mean, Princess Leia being dressed completely in white. I mean, even from a Catholic point of view, I mean, that's baptismal imagery right there.
Right.
You know, and of course, purity and innocence and all of that versus Darth Vader, who is all in black, complete, you know, polar opposites there. And even Han Solo is sort of a mix of the two. And Luke, even, you know, he's got more of kind of the sand tan browns of Tatooine, but still it's on the lighter color. What's interesting, though, now that I think about it, is in episode 6, he's dressed in black, even though he's still the hero.
Right.
Well, that was explicit because they wanted to give him and as a kid, this didn't come out to me, but rewatching it as an adult, and especially in the context of as Star Wars developed, the idea was that Luke is continually facing greater and greater temptation of the dark side. And so in Empire, he's in this sort of darker khaki gray.
Oh, sure. Yeah. On Dagobah.
Sort of outfit. And then by Jedi, he's, you know, here he comes. He's dressed in black and dark brown. And, you know, the fear is, you know, oh, is he going full on Vader himself? Is he falling to the literal dark side? And,
which is interesting that you bring that up. I've never connected it that way, but it's also paralleled in Anakin in episode 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because even Anakin, it's like in episode 2, he's wearing darker colors than Obi-Wan. And same thing with episode 3. Obi-Wan's got the traditional brown and kind of white, and Anakin's in that, you know, dark gray and blacks. And yeah, if you kind of get that bird's eye view, it's like, okay. And then, of course, clearly, you know, Luke succeeds where Anakin didn't with those temptations.
And I like that they parallel both those both their costumes through the trilogies. And then, speaking of Jedi outfits, like, I was always disappointed that the prequels, just as you said, Robert, kind of standardized Obi-Wan's hermit wear as just the Jedi robes. That always disappointed me. But
it's a really cool look, but yeah, it's like
they're not functional for a night, like it's.
But it makes cosplay really easy. All you need is your brown bathrobe, and you're good.
But I thought that I like the aesthetic of the High Republic Jedi.
Did you watch The Acolyte?
Yes. Yeah.
I will agree. I didn't care for much of The Acolyte, but the costuming in The Acolyte and the fights were phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Especially the white and gold that they wear in a lot of the comic books and on the book covers, like that with the trimmings of brown, and like it looks like they've got leather on parts of their armor, and just that white and gold with the
what I think of as their field
emblem,
uniform.
The difference between the field uniform and the kind of temple wear, but they just look more like paladins, like knights with that color scheme. And I think that if they had gone for something that maybe incorporated a bit of Obi-Wan's kind of have like what is that? What that Eastern garb called? A gi? That kind of
the. Are you thinking of like the tabard that kind of comes down over the front?
Yeah, that's kind of where it looks almost like, like what you see in kung fu movies or something like a warrior monk would wear. But then like I feel like that I actually like Anakin's Clone Wars outfit a lot, because there's and even Obi-Wan's, because they wear parts of armor combined with some of the the cloth. I think that like Obi-Wan's like General Kenobi look, I think it's just great. I mean, I have a picture of it a painting of it behind me, but like, his General Kenobi look where he's wearing armor parts, but also the brown cloth, I like a lot. Yeah. To me, that's what a Jedi should look like in like the Clone Wars, or just in combat in general, their combat gear.
Yeah. I think I didn't like that in the Clone Wars, specifically because I don't think of the Jedi as being about combat. And so having like actual combat armor strikes me as an undermining of the Jedi ideal. But as a costume decision, it's a great piece of characterization. And I think they kind of intended for that, like, I don't know, mental frisson to come out of like, these are supposed to be keepers of the peace. These are supposed to be not so much warrior monks as defender protector monks. And here they are, generals leading battle in armor, and there's I think it was supposed to be like a little bit dissonant there.
Well, I that's exactly why I appreciate it, because the moment that they said yes to like engaging in the Clone Wars, they lost. The whole point of the Clone Wars is it was just a manipulation of Darth Sidious, and the moment the Jedi said yes, we will fight, they lost. And so even the visualness of that, I think, is totally true. Yeah, you're defenders of the peace, and yet you're wearing armor for battle. That dissonates.
I guess it doesn't dissonate as much for me, because I'm like, well, if you're going to defend the peace, you might end up having to fight somebody,
versus General Kenobi, who's leading the army. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I get that as like, the Jedi are not supposed to be like leading armies, but I always considered them as like knights errant, in the like Arthurian like sense, they're like the knights of the round table and stuff. I'm like, so in my mind, it's like they should look kind of like knights. And it's like, yeah, I just feel like, with the robes and stuff, and I get too that they're trying to evoke monastic traditions of both the Christian West and the Buddhist East, but it's like, and I understand that, but at the same time, I was like, and especially with the Jedi so rooted in the Templar tradition. I mean, in an early script of Star Wars, they're called the Jedi Templars, So it's like I always imagine them at least having like, shoulder pauldrons or something to evoke in your mind, or gauntlets or something. Just and the High Republic does that really well. Like a lot of them will wear gauntlets or shit, something on their legs to just a little bit of like that evokes in your mind knight errant, keeper of the peace or something. At least that's how it works in my imagination, I guess. And that's the great thing about Star Wars is that like part of it is just imagining it in our heads, right? That this sort of headcanon of the aesthetic of what we believe it should look like, right?
Right.
And how there's sort of something for everybody in the vast, timeline and universe of Star Wars.
And yet I totally appreciate that it's clearly a whole different galaxy. I mean, they intentionally make the costumes feel otherworldly, or, the hairstyles are not what you see here. Now, granted, we might wear them now because of Star Wars, but like, those things, it helps with that. Well, it helps with me, like, to get like, when I watch Star Wars, I like to get out of myself and be entertained and be brought to that galaxy. If it's too much like everything you're here on Earth, like, okay, I can just go watch a, reality TV show, but, no, we want to like go to that galaxy far, far away. And then, watch our favorite characters, play out their stories.
And the way Star Wars uses the costumes as a kind of language to communicate so much about the characters, so much about the world that they live in. I'm thinking when Darth Maul first appeared, and he was wearing something not too different from what Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were wearing.
Yeah,
but it was a little flowier, and it was all black.
Yeah,
and so it immediately said there's a connection here, but there's also a major difference. And it just communicated kind of the relationship immediately, simply through the costuming. I'm thinking about how this has been developing in some of the more recent media that Disney's been putting out. I'm thinking like Ahsoka's costume in her live action series.
That was good too.
Which like built on the costumes that had sort of developed through the Clone Wars and through Rebels, and yet also incorporated some of the themes that we saw in Darth Maul, and in and that we also see later in the Stranger or Chimere in the Acolyte. Sort of the baggier pants and the and the tight fitted torso, and it just like there are these sort of themes that run through the costuming.
One thing that was pointed out when I was watching Ahsoka, in fact, they made a Lord of the Rings reference, but like Ahsoka is like she's kind of in grays, and then she has that experience in the world between worlds, and she kind of heals, and then she becomes Ahsoka the White.
Ahsoka the White, yes, I love that. I was like, yes.
But again, it's that transition from a darker color to showing healing and purification and peace, even I think for Ahsoka.
And she falls into water, so there's that baptismal imagery, and then gets dressed in white, which after you're, so there's that baptismal connection. We mentioned the newer stuff. I have a lot of the art of books for both The Mandalorian and the new trilogy, and it's fascinating to see the costume choices that were abandoned, that were not used. And I feel like Rey was done a really disservice. I felt some of the costumes that they were playing around with for Rey were just fantastic Jedi outfits, and they opted to stick more with her scavenger look.
I assume, now correct me if I'm wrong, I actually was thinking about that because when you look at Anakin and Luke and then Rey is sort of the next one, and they all the various kind of changes in their wardrobe. Rey kind of changes in episode 8, which I really liked her look in episode 8, but then she kind of reverts back. Mm-hmm. And I always assumed it was because of the scenes that she had shot with Carrie Fisher, and they needed to kind of match her wardrobe to that, rather than at least that's the way that I interpret it. But it was disappointing that they couldn't bring in a new, more kind of fleshed out Jedi robe look for her. Yeah. But I understand, like the scenes with Carrie Fisher, she had to be in her kind of scavenger outfit.
And it's amazing to see in the art of the Force Awakens how many iterations they went through with Kylo Ren's look to get it right. And they went through so many different, like for a while he was an alien, and like they had all these like really crazy different mask designs. And I think what they settled on was very simple, and I think it works. I feel like his mask has become iconic in its own way. Mm-hmm. You know, it's reminiscent of Darth Vader's a little bit. It's black, it has the flare in the back, but it's different enough so that you're like, okay, he's like Darth. They're clearly using it, like you said, Robert, with that language to communicate to us. He's like Darth Vader, but he's also different. He's his own character.
Yeah. See, and I'm going to kind of go the opposite way on that one. I didn't really like Kylo Ren's look, and I think maybe because it was both Ben trying to emulate Darth Vader, and like we've already seen this in Darth Vader, and I didn't like the repetitive feel of it. So I was happy when the helmet got destroyed in episode 5, and then I was disappointed when he glued it back together. And maybe for me, like I wanted in a villain for the sequel trilogy. Like I get with Darth Vader, it's iconic, and I mean, even with the mask, I mean, the mask kind of plays into his character, and of course in episode 6, when you finally have that unveiling of the human behind the mask, you know, that was such a powerful moment. But I think what I was wanting in the sequel trilogy was I wanted more of a villain who was not afraid to show his face from the beginning and sort of be not vulnerable, but more so, because a mask always means that you're kind of hiding yourself, and there's this barrier, and I like the idea of a villain, and maybe I'm kind of being drawn towards more my love of Thrawn, who's just like, especially the Legends version of Thrawn, just like he is who he is, and he's not afraid to show it, and it's he's a different kind of villain. You know, he inspires loyalty by his tactics and his brilliance. And then, you know, with Kylo, I mean, he was kind of an unstable kid still that needed to grow. And he does that by the end of episode 9. But I don't know. I didn't really care for the mask. And
I kind of come down between you. I really liked the mask. I was disappointed that it wasn't a functional helmet in the way that Vader's helmet was a functional helmet, or the Stormtrooper helmets were functional helmets. And, you know, we'd already seen Darth Maul without a mask.
Right.
So the mask wasn't essential to the Sith. Though with Kylo Ren and again with Chimere, who I think I loved his costume design, and I loved his mask, his helmet.
It was a creepy mask.
It was so creepy. It was like Kylo Ren on steroids. It was fantastic.
Yeah. But with the jagged teeth, it just did reminiscent of like an alien. And
or like if the Joker were a Sith Lord.
Yeah,
that's what. His
I like that. Like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't like the rest of Kylo Ren's costuming, and maybe it's just that, like from the beginning, I like Adam Driver as an actor. I respect him a tremendous amount. I think he was miscast as Kylo Ren. It just like I couldn't take him seriously for some reason.
That's funny because for me that made it more believable. I'm like, yeah, he's a kid trying to be Darth Vader, and I got that. Like for me, I'm like, okay, I understand his character. He's kind of a bratty kid who wants to act like Darth Vader. And the mask, the fact that it wasn't functional, he didn't need it for anything. For me,
he was just trying to be like Grandpa.
Yeah, he's just cosplaying as his grandpa, Darth Vader. And to me, that made perfect sense. I was like...
Well, I mean, maybe this turns into like a fundamental critique of the sequel trilogy. but you know, just sticking to the costume, I just it didn't work for me. And you can see actually, like, again, like watching the development, the way similar ideas to what they did with Kylo Ren show up in like the costuming of Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati.
Their costumes are great.
Yeah, those worked at a you know, a gut level for me in a way that Kylo Ren's didn't, and I'm not sure why exactly, but yeah, it's just I mean it really is subjective, like what works and what doesn't, but I think what helps something work for more people is developing that language of costume that we've been talking about, you have a costume that partakes of the language of what's gone before and communicates something about the character with it. Are there, just shifting gears a little bit here, are there any costumes that you really didn't like, that didn't work for you? And I'll start off. And this is purely subjective, and I think I'm going to get pushback from you because Thomas, you already said you liked it. I did not like the pilot jumpsuits for either the Rebel era or the Republic era, and I think a lot of it is I just don't like the color orange. And I just thought, it looks dumb. I mean, it looks
when you live
like
in New York, you see orange all the time because it's like it's part of the state's iconography and flags and stuff like that. So I guess like New York City has orange on the flag, and so I guess I'm just used to it.
Okay.
I don't like orange, but in any particular way, but it doesn't like scream at me like ugh. But your mileage may vary. It is a very like garish color. Yeah.
I hate to be, I'm not a bandwagon jumper when it comes to this, but I didn't like the biker gang in the Book of Boba Fett, the colorful you remember that they had scooters, and they were the half tech kind of gang. Like I appreciated them in the group and I understood their function. It felt way out of place for Mos Eisley. It would have felt way more in place like it had been on Coruscant or Corellia.
Yeah.
It just so I guess maybe it wasn't that I didn't like the costumes. It just, they felt out of place, like this super colorful in the midst of Mos Eisley, and I can get on board with that. I think I was more upset about the scooters themselves. The costumes, didn't grab me as much, but I can absolutely see where you're coming from on that.
I think for me, like the costumes I didn't like, and I'm going to seem like a jerk for saying this, I guess, but like...
I mean, I am asking us...
Just don't say the Mandalorians, and then you're fine. Good.
But it's like, I didn't... even when I was a kid to like when I was adult, I don't understand them. Amidala's queen outfit.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we sort of mentioned that, didn't we? Just like they're unpractical. They're gorgeous, but they're very unpractical.
To me, like they didn't have that Star Wars language. Like I'm like, this almost seems like it comes from another series. Even when I was a kid, I thought that. And I'm like, maybe that's the purpose, but it's like, you know, it just didn't. So much of the Naboo design from everything.
The whole Naboo aesthetic, the ship design.
I like their ships. That's the one thing that has grown on me is Naboo's fighters.
They are very cool
yachts.
Ships, but they still don't feel Star Warsy to me.
Right.
See, and I think I love everything about Episode 1. Even the unpracticalness of Amidala's outfits.
Yeah, it's like but those are the only costumes that I guess don't speak to me. But I know they speak to many people because on Star Wars Fan boards. So I see people gush about the Amidala's costume design. So I am not here to rain on anybody's parade about that, but.
And again, they speak a language. They say this is
queen.
This is royalty. This is somebody who commands, who doesn't do things herself, who commands others to do things for her. Right. And that so the impracticality of the costume is part of its message, part of its purpose. And so it's effective. But I agree. I much preferred the sort of elegant simplicity of Leia's original gown. That iconic white gown with like just a little, the jeweled belt and the necklace, and that's it. Yeah.
Speaking of Amidala, I will say that I did love her look in episode 2 when like they're on like Geonosis and they're fighting and all that.
Because it was like almost like not a call back because these movies take place before, but
the foreshadowing of
Leia in white, and that white cape that she has before I think she loses it in the conveyor belt. Yeah. I do like that. Yeah.
So she's not always impractical, just when she's queen. But even as a senator, she has some crazy hair outfits as well. But even that again speaks to her role as senator versus just Padme Amidala.
Yeah.
And I think it's supposed to communicate to us the kind of decadence that the Republic has kind of gone into, almost like the outfits of those people in the Hunger Games who are in like the upper echelon of society, where it's supposed to show like, or this is like, ancient Rome at its worst, just like the decadence of like the upper class and the elites and stuff like that. Where it's like normal people, can barely be clothed, and like these people can have all this extraneous clothes that does nothing, like is not functional or practical in any way.
This is the thing. I mean, Star Wars costume design is always intentional, the visual design of everything, but costumes are I think the more you delve into them, the more meaning you can mine out of the costumes, because they clearly put a lot of thought into what these costumes were trying to convey about the characters, about the situation, about everything. I also love that even when I say let's get negative for a moment here, we end up coming back to things that we actually like. It's like it's a credit to the costume designers who do it, and just the visual power of the series. So, as I mentioned toward the beginning, as we're recording this, it's October. It's nearing Halloween, and I don't know about you guys, but every once in a while, I drop by a fan convention of some kind or other. Have you ever dressed up in cosplay?
So I'll start on this one because I've thought about this a lot, and the long and the short of it is ultimately no, not in the sense that you're asking, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I have done like I had a robe and I dressed up as a Jedi, for Halloween and one time, and not so much as a kid, actually. This has been like even since being a priest, and like going over to this Catholic school when I was down in Cheyenne, and dressing up as a Jedi. And I mentioned earlier, even my Mandalorian armor, which I do have. The goal was to wear it especially to like fan conventions and different Comic-Cons. And as I started to go to those, the first one that I went to was in Denver, and I had just been ordained a priest, and I didn't have any cosplay stuff. And so what I did, and it sort of just stuck as my style, is what I dress when I go to Comic-Cons. And so I'm actually never going to wear an actual cosplay fully, because I like what I do is I wear my clerics, but I then throw on a geeky t-shirt over it, usually to match if I'm going to get a picture with a celebrity and their particular show.
Right on.
And so I like, for me, cosplay is great, but I'm never going to do it because I always like to have my priest collar show and then a Kiki t-shirt over it, because that prompts all sorts of fun conversations at conventions from fellow Catholics who are there, who are very excited to see a priest who's at a convention with them and celebrating, a Comic-Con, to waiting in line for autographs, to people saying, you can't ever have children, and, going down that road, because as a priest, I'm celibate, right?
What?
So, they like that's what some of them, it's like, you realize that, don't you? I'm like, yeah, of course I realize that. This is the life that I chose. But then others, I've met, I've never had a negative reaction. It's always either been sort of a, why are you a priest when you can't have a family, or those kind of questions, which are fun to have with people because you kind of get to talk about the nature of celibacy and what it means and the fruitfulness of it, to even meeting celebrities who are Catholic. So Carrie Elwes would be the one that I would highlight the most. When I met him, he instead of me being sort of awestruck of him, he saw the collar and immediately wrote down a couple names and asked me to pray for his friends who had cancer.
Oh, wow.
And I've never had that encounter with a celebrity, because usually the celebrity, it's all about them. And not that they're mean or rude, but they know that and so he flipped the tables, and it was he was so excited to meet me. And I was just like, oh, okay, this is great. And then the other, Ashley Eckstein, is also a faithful Catholic. So, and the voice of Ahsoka, for those of you who need that reminder, so it's really cool to meet them. And then because I'm wearing the collar and not in cosplay, that opens all sorts of conversation doors that I really love. The other common response I get is, well, I grew up Catholic. And then it's I know you're trying to relate, and I'm not taking offense at that, but that's kind of an offensive thing to say to a priest when it's I grew up Catholic, but then I left. Okay. We've got about, 30 seconds to talk here at the autograph table. That's not enough to at all get into a conversation. But, I appreciate that they're trying to connect, and I thank them for their time and whatnot. But so I share that because that's kind of where I'm coming from. The other really cool thing that I did want to share in this vein of conversation too is, even though I personally don't dress up so much in cosplay, I've met a lot of cool people in the cosplay community who do. And that was a weird thing. When COVID hit, everybody sort of got onto social media. And so I connected through Instagram with a number of people. And I've become really good friends from different people, usually in the Mandalorian circles, because that's where my cosplay interests lie. But I've met a really good friend up in Vancouver, British Columbia, one who lives in Hamilton, Ontario. In fact, he's getting married and wants me to come to his wedding. He's not Catholic, but we're working on that. Another friend that I met down in Florida, and and it was really cool. I've met all three of them in person because I've been to all various different places. And especially during COVID, when everything was just locked down, it was really cool to be able to reach out and to make these connections, and then even have the experience of one in the community committing suicide. And having the response of, it was, and he was one that I'd considered a friend as well. And he, to have the community, even a number of people reach out to me because they knew that I was a priest, and just either want to talk or is asking, the question, is he going to hell? All of these sorts of things. It was a weird, God's grace and providence. I had not intended it to be an avenue of ministry, but it was really cool to be able to speak some truth into that situation, and also just to grieve with the other guys too. Because y'all kind of, you form this community, especially within the cosplay community. You kind of know each other, even though you're all over the country, because when you go to cons, everybody tries to tend to gather together and hang out. And so there's a really, it was just a really cool experience to be able to be a part of that. And so even though I don't fully cosplay, I've been welcomed into the community. And so it's it's really it's a really cool place to be as a priest and a Star Wars fan.
I mean, it is amazing how the way that you dress changes the way people relate to you. And you know, my experience of this was I was at Worldcon a few years ago, and I had borrowed an Obi-Wan Kenobi costume, and I wore it for one day of the con. And the days I was wearing street clothes, I was anonymous in the middle of the crowd. And when I walked in wearing the Kenobi costume, everyone was looking at me. People were coming up and talking to me. Other people dressed as Jedi or other Star Wars fans were coming up, and yeah, it immediately formed a connection. And the thing is, that's not just costume, it's clothing. And like you say about the collar, it sends a message. It has a language to it that says, you know, I'm a priest. I am committed to this faith, and I am committed to serving people from the standpoint of the faith.
And for me, like, I hope in broadcast, come talk to me.
Yeah.
You know, especially in a situation like that, where you can, well, just if you're going to be mean, no, but you know, but yeah, I mean, so many people out there have not a clue, and it's cool to talk to them.
Thomas, I want to make sure you have a chance to jump in here. Do you have like experiences of costume or the way you dress affecting the way people interact with you?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think I've ever dressed as a Star Wars character, even for Halloween. I usually dressed as something else as a kid, and I can't remember if my brother ever did Star Wars costuming. And I've had a vague like interest in cosplay, but I'm like, you know, I'm like, what would I be? I was thinking before we got on, like, what would I functionally, what would I be able to do? And like, well, what would I like to do if I were to dress as a Star Wars character? And it went back to me to like that Rebels aesthetic that I mentioned before, like either as a pilot or like one of the Rebel troopers. Like my favorite Rebel soldier outfit is the Hoth outfit.
Okay,
I just love the Hoth troopers outfit. I also like the Endor troopers outfit, just with like, you know, the green smock and the helmet. I'm like, okay, that's something I could do without having to be super fit or something, or where I wouldn't like die of heat stroke in the helmet, you know, like where it's so like, and I like the Rebels. I like their aesthetic. You know, like it screams more. And since I'm a military history guy, it screams more like real world, like soldiery, you know, to me. And it's like, you know, that would be something that would be fun for me to cosplay as. But if I did, it would be in the future. I don't think I have the resources to assemble a screen accurate costume of those right now. But to your point about like the way you dress, like just being that people interact with you differently, that I was thinking back to, like, you know, that's something, my academic background is anthropology. And that's something we definitely covered in like our foundational courses, was that, you know, especially with cultural anthropology, that clothes are a language. You are communicating messages to people by the clothes that you wear, because there are cultural expectations and subcultural expectations built around clothing. You know, like, you know, a person in a three-piece suit is going to, you know, or a very fancy dress is going to elicit different reactions than a person like walking around in their pajamas or something. So, like, you know, like you're sending different messages, you know, about class, about ethnicity, about age, about all kinds of stuff from your background, just by the clothes you wear. And one thing about that I'd like, and this is a pet peeve for me. Okay, I'm a graphic tee guy. I like wearing graphic T-shirts, and there's been a pushback recently against graphic T-shirts, saying if you're an adult, you should not wear graphic T-shirts. It's unattractive. And I'm like, says who? Like,
that's always what I wear over my clerics when I go to Comic-Con.
Right, yeah. Right. I'm like, says some people. I'm like, people like to make these universal statements about what's attractive and unattractive in terms of clothing, where if you have an anthropology background, like me, that is more relative than what people like to make it. Fashions change over time, even in a culture. And
it's context dependent too.
It is context dependent. Yeah, you're not going to wear a graphic T-shirt to a job interview. But
depends on the job.
Depends on, yes. I mean, I guess that's also true. But I mean, like, if you were going to go into like some sort of like, white collar job interview with a graphic T-shirt, they might look at you funny. But it's like people who just shame people for just wearing them out and about. Like, I don't understand that. So. And I like collecting Star Wars graphic T-shirts, so I have a nice little collection of those. So yeah, it's me sending a message that I like Star Wars, and like you said, Father, if you like Star Wars, come and talk to me. Like that's the message you're sending. I'm a part of this fan community. It's like it is like tattoos do the same thing. Often. Yeah, and that's another thing. Star Wars tattoos are also, a thing as well. And I think my favorite Star Wars, and we could do a whole nother episode on like the symbolism in terms of like Star Wars, like literally like iconography, like the different like symbols and of the different factions and stuff. Like I love like the Rebel Starbird symbol, and like I would have that on everything if I tees, car decals, anything. So I know I've seen tons of people with it tattooed on their arm. It's just something to say, like, not only that you're a fan of Star Wars, but that I'm a fan of this faction, the Rebel Alliance. I like their ideals. I like what they stand for. It's like you're sending. There's many layers to the communication that's being done through clothing and iconography, or not just Star Wars, but around, anything really.
But one of the fundamental messages that it sends is, we have something in common. Yeah. You can talk to me, we are part of the same community in some way or other. We have some thread of connection between us. And like you say, Father, it's there's the collar, which is sometimes inviting and sometimes threatening to people, but combined with the graphic tee, it's like that says, hey, I'm one of you, I'm safe.
Well, and it opens it up to, you can ask me about being a priest, but you don't have to. We can totally stay in the realm of Star Wars, and I'm not there to push religion by any means. I'm there because I'm a fan.
Right.
And so, like, if you're not comfortable talking about it, I'm not going to push it. We're going to talk about Anakin and Luke and, till the cows come home. And that's perfectly fine. But if you want to talk about religion, I'm also happy to do that too.
Yeah. Because this is, we are complex beings. There's more to us than just one thing.
Well, and that's actually precisely why I like to do this. Well, I like to do it because I like Star Wars. One of the secondary sort of benefits is it opens all sorts of doors, even back at the parish. Like the parish, people often sort of idolize their priests or put them on pedestals. And like, I like to come back and be like, I'm just as human as you all. And yes, I'm a priest, and yes, there's sacramental grace there. Yes, I'm the one who's able to celebrate, the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and all of that is true. But I'm also happy to just grab a beer and talk about, the latest episode of The Mandalorian with you guys too. And it sort of it frees people up to then opening up to me, which then elicits that relationship of trust, which can then lead to like, okay, you've got something really going on in your life, and they're more comfortable in being vulnerable versus, that unapproachable priest. How do I even talk to him about this issue that I have in my life? Versus, oh yeah, Father Andrew, we've talked Star Wars, all that. I'm comfortable, opening up more to him than I would be, somebody else. So it's multifaceted. It's really a grace and a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I think it was Augustine who said something like, I am a priest for you, but I am a baptized Christian for myself. Mm-hmm. That the priesthood is a gift that God gives me to give to you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make me a better Christian,
right?
In and of itself. Yeah. I kind of wish the Jedi had that attitude more.
Well, this is why they failed.
This is why they failed. The dark side clouds everything. Well, I think it's time to put a hat on this episode. So we would now like to hear from you, our listeners. What are your favorite costumes? What's your experience of cosplay? How do you use your clothing or costume to communicate who you are to the people around you? And what do you want to hear from Secrets of Star Wars next? We would love to hear from you. You can get in touch with us by sending us an email at starwars@sqpn.com. We're on several social media pages, including Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. We're on X, formerly known as Twitter. We're at SQPN. We're on Instagram at StarQuest Network. And you can follow this podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever you have. Leave us a review or just give us a like. That kind of thing really helps us build the StarQuest community, the Secrets of Star Wars community, and keeps the conversation going. Once again, if you'd like to support our work here, you can go to sqpn.com/give, join our patrons on Patreon, or just give a donation to help us keep this work going. So, thanks for a great conversation. Until next time, Thomas, it's always great to talk to you.
Oh, thank you, Robert. This has been a pleasure, as always.
And Father Fett, it's fantastic to have you on the show.
Yeah, no, it's good to be back on the show after my hiatus. So this is great. Thank you.
Yeah. Once again, I'm Robert King. Thank you for sharing the secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Join a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go on pilgrimage to the mysterious shrines and sites of Italy in the Jubilee year 2025 with Jimmy Aiken and me, Dom Bettinelli. Go with us on a 12-day, all-inclusive tour that gives you incredible access to Jimmy's insights in Rome, Assisi, Orvieto, Monte Cassino, San Giovanni Rotondo, the Grotto of St. Michael, and more. We're also planning special activities like recording on location for future episodes of Mysterious World and an in-person Weird Questions episode just for pilgrims. Space is limited and filling up, so be sure to find out more. Visit mysterious.fm/Italy 2025 to reserve your spot today. That's mysterious.fm/Italy 2025.